is where I lay it down, every burden, every crown. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. And here is where I lay it down, every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Here is where I lay it down. You are all I'm chasing now. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. And here is where I lay it down. You are all I'm chasing now. This is my surrender. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Oh, shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Oh, your way is better. Shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Oh, your way is better. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Oh, I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Oh, your way is better.
Hello, friends. It's good to be with you. Good to be back with you. As most of you know, Dustin and I have been out in Wyoming for the whole summer on sabbatical. And when I was first asked to speak about what the Lord has shown me through this time of COVID and pandemic and everything that's been going on, I was actually glad because I've finally come to a revelation of what the Lord's been trying to tell me throughout this whole time. So hopefully you'll be able to find some relevance to the words that I'm about to share with you, or at least have an open heart and mind to what it is that the Lord had to say to me and possibly to you. I want to apologize, I'm recording outside because it's beautiful out, but I am kind of by a street, so it might be a little loud. So lesson number one, I've got to say that moving to another state in the middle of a pandemic, a state whose population is the size of the Canton-Akron area as a whole, the whole state is that population, was a little alarming to me, but I'm learning a lot through it. So I'm used to a lot of people. I'm used to people around all the time. I'm used to hosting events. I'm used to churches. I'm used to being in busy places. So this time is super weird for a lot of us, especially if we are used to being around people. We're used to being in crowds. I usually am able to meet people anywhere I go. So that might be, if I'm going to a restaurant or a coffee shop, I can make friends wherever I am. And that's not really something that we can do right now in this time of pandemic. So other than the literally three people in this town that we know and are friends with, that Dustin is out on the river rowing a boat with, we don't know anyone other than those three. And so by working from home, from studying from home, from obviously living at home, being there all the time, it quickly led to me feeling lonely. I was feeling really lonely. And this is something that I didn't really think that was possible, because I am an introvert at heart. I gain my strength I recharge by being by myself. So anytime Dustin says he has meetings at night and I don't, I'm like, woo, I get to be by myself for a while. But I think all of this time of being by myself has actually changed the way that I've seen what it actually means to be lonely, and maybe needing people more than I expected that I needed them in my life. And maybe some of you are feeling this way too. I mean, we tend to need people. We need community. I mean, we preach on this a lot. We talk about it a lot. God created us for community. So in a time where we can't actually connect and be in community, it's really weird, right? And so it's taken me this whole summer to come to my not only acceptance of loneliness, but also in the way that it can be turned for good. So God tends to do this. He turns everything for our benefit, right? He makes it work together for our good. And I began to accept that and not see it as times of loneliness, but as times of solitude. And there is a shift there. And I think that that is my biggest thing that I've learned, is the shift of loneliness to solitude. Rather than self-wallowing in me being lonely, I'm able to utilize this time and turn it for good, turn it for the benefit of my own spiritual disciplines, turn it into hearing from the Lord more. And so I think we all tend to have this struggle, probably to an extent. And even me, who thought she wanted to be alone a lot more, has had to recognize that this time alone, this time away from people, needs to be filled with goodness rather than just junk. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with watching TV or whatever, scrolling on the internet, but the purpose that we're doing that for, is it just to waste time? Or is it something that, are we utilizing this time that we have as a gift from God, or are we just using it and trying to get by? I think that's a big thing that he's been teaching me, is how we tend to fill up our time, and I do this too. At night, oftentimes, we'll watch Netflix, we binge watch shows, we try to fill up our time, but I've realized that I need to kind of pause that and not fill it up, because it's not really my time to do with what I want, but rather God has given us this gift of life and time. And especially during pandemic, some of us have more time than we used to, because we don't have as many meetings to go to, or we don't have XYZ. So, one of the ways that I think that we, and me particularly, of what I've learned, what God's been teaching me, one of the ways that we can do this, turning this loneliness into solitude into goodness with God is being mindful and being present. And so one of the ways that I've been doing this is taking a lot of hikes. I've been walking a lot more. I've been out in nature. And yes, I have some really cool nature out here in Wyoming with me, but Northeast Ohio has some really cool nature too. We've got Stark Parks, any of the trails, any of the ponds and reservoirs and lakes that we have. We have the Cuyahoga Valley National Park system, which is beautiful. There's lots of trails, even if you don't want to walk, even if you don't want to hike, if you can't walk. There's nature to see, there's things to see, and there's ways to be mindful, even if you are in a cement block and can't get outside. I think that there's ways that we can be mindful. And so for a while, when I take walks, at least back in Ohio, I usually put in my headphones, I listen to podcasts or audiobooks or music, and just kind of like have something going on while I'm walking, kind of pay attention to where I am, kind of not. And I realized the more that I was walking here, that I didn't need that or want that as much. I didn't feel the need to fill up my ears as well, because nature is crying out, and we can see that, and we can hear that, and we can be a part of it. So I actually took out my headphones, in all honesty, because when I found out there's rattlesnakes here, I needed to listen in case they were going to attack me, right? So I took out my earphones so I could listen to them. But all of a sudden, I am hearing all these things. I'm hearing birds chirping to each other and flying by, and their wings flapping. I'm hearing grasshoppers and like whatever bugs are making all sorts of like chirpy noises. I'm seeing these dogs, all these happy dogs running through the woods and the trails. Families out camping. There's so much to see. But when I'm in my book, when I'm in my audiobook or my podcast, again, not saying these are bad, but when your mindset is kind of changed, I've realized that it changes your outlook. So when I'm mindful of what I'm doing, when I'm just walking and just being in nature, it turns from that loneliness where I feel like I have to fill it up with listening to things, to solitude with God, where He brings out nature for me. I hope this is kind of making sense for some of us. And maybe you resonate with this, and maybe you don't. Maybe you've got it all figured out, and that's great. But this is what I've been learning through all of this. Even in this, it was reminding me of my great-grandpa. Now, he passed a long time ago. But we would go visit him, and I always found it was really strange how he would sit in his driveway, just in a lawn chair, sit in his driveway, and just stare at traffic. Now, he lived on a busy street, so there was a lot to look at, but when we were over there as little kids, we wanted to, there's TV inside, there's radio, he had a bunch of musical instruments we wanted to play with. And so I always found it strange that, he wasn't inside. There's cartoons to watch, there's M&Ms to eat. Why would we want to sit outside and watch cars go by? And I've noticed this actually a lot more the older I get, and have actually realized how important it is to just sit and be present. He was just being mindful. He was being present in the moment. When his family came to visit, he didn't feel the need to entertain necessarily, but to be there with them. And so we sat in the driveway and hung out with them. So being mindful and being present no matter where you are. If you're in an assisted living facility, if you're in a suburban neighborhood, if you're in a busy city block, you can find these moments of presence and being mindful of where you are, not trying to fill up the times and with things and watching things, listening to things, but rather just be present, be mindful, just stare for a while. God might illuminate something to you. I think it's important to get away from that norm of busyness, of filling ourselves with things, because Jesus would often slip away into the wilderness and pray. He would leave whatever he was doing to go pray. It says that in Luke 5:16. And this wilderness, whatever this may be, so he obviously had an actual wilderness to go out and pray. We might not have that. We might not have a mountain to climb. We might just have a little backyard. We might just have a window to look out. Whatever it is, we need to get away to pray and to be with the Lord. And so that's kind of one of the new practices of turning this loneliness into solitude that I've been working on myself. The other thing, lesson number 2, if we want to say it that way, hindsight is always 20/20, as they say. It's a saying for a reason. And the past decade or so, I've been going really strong. I've been adding on any committees I can, any jobs that I can. I've got a bazillion part-time jobs. I add all sorts of committees and volunteering things. I volunteer for whatever. I add it all to my plate. And this time of solitude, these couple months where I've been learning this transition from loneliness to solitude, has really taught me this idea of boundaries and the need to say no to things. I do not have to prove myself. I think when it comes down to it, I'm trying to prove that just because I'm a woman or just because I'm young, which I'm not that young anymore, but 10 years ago I was, but just because I might have things that might not give me the upper hand in society, I feel like I need to grab onto all those things. But really, I need to set boundaries so that I can be a whole human. And the most important thing is that I know who I am with God, not who other people say I am. And I know a lot of us are getting busier at this time of life, especially now that school's back. Some of us have to figure out how to teach kids from home. Some of us have to figure out a new schedule of working from home or taking kids to school or whatever. Now things are filling up, and we have to kind of figure out a new schedule. But what I would challenge each of us to do is not forget this time that God has given you. Sure, things have been taken away from our norms. Things have definitely been taken away from what we were used to. But maybe our norm is changing. Maybe that space, those things that were taken away, can now be filled with God. Maybe we can have solitude with the Lord. Make sure to set boundaries, not to overcrowd yourself. When things start to pick up, sports and school and all that, don't go crazy again. At least that's what I'm learning. I'm hoping that maybe some of you are in that same boat with me. But set boundaries. Even Jesus set boundaries, right? We read in Matthew 14:23, he sent the crowds away. He went on the mountain by himself to pray, and when it was evening, he was there alone. So Jesus, the King of our heart, sent people away from him. He needed that time. If Jesus can send people away from him, you can send people away from you. I can send people away from me. Not in a mean way, but like you need that time. Otherwise, you have nothing to give to people. So sometimes you have to seek out the solitude. Jesus was surrounded by people, and he still found time to be alone with God. And sometimes, maybe like this time, you are given this time of solitude. Solitude is thrust on you. But be careful that doesn't change to loneliness too quickly. Utilize this time as a time to focus on God and focus on what he's given you. Just meditate, just be present with the Lord. These times of stillness can be used however you want. But I think perhaps Jesus wants us to reorient our hearts toward him in this time that we find ourselves in. So blessings on each of you as you go forward this week. Stay safe, stay healthy, wear your masks, wash your hands, and find some times of solitude with the Father. Bye, guys.